The climate crisis is a multifaceted disaster with increasingly frequent and increasingly severe climate-fueled disasters occurring, including droughts, flash floods, waterborne diseases, ever-increasing soil acidity, and desert locusts. The Horn of Africa drought is the most severe drought in 40 years as a result of 5 consecutive years of rain failure. It has affected millions of communities in a catastrophic ways. The drought has resulted in not only 6 million livestock loss of production, loss of livelihood, and loss of hope for hundreds of thousands of people, but also shifted ways of life and diminished their political power and identity. More than 20 million people are under urgent humanitarian assistance. In Ethiopia, temperature is expected to rise between 1.4 to 2.9 degrees centigrade by 2025. Climate change impacts are estimated to reduce the GDP of Ethiopia up to 10% by 2045, especially drought impacts. As a result of the Horn of Africa drought, in Ethiopia alone, more than 10 million pastoralists and agro-pastoralists communities lost their livelihood assets and are forced to leave their localities. These facts reflect the immediate steps that need to be taken to fight climate change. As an ActionAid, we work in particular with women and towards gender justice. Women are disproportionately affected by climate change because their position in the society and existing gender inequality. In these years of drought, people's livelihood have been destroyed, and it is women who are bearing the heaviest burden. In Borana, a region in Ethiopia, it is women who now must walk 18 kilometers to fetch water, even when they are pregnant. It is women who are sparing food out of their mouths to feed their children. Meanwhile, women and children account for a majority of the 2.7 million people displaced in the 3 countries, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. And displaced women are at increased risk of gender-based violence, sexual violation, and trafficking. UN Women reported that the drought is having a devastating impact on the lives and livelihoods of affected communities in Ethiopia, forcing families into adopting negative survival strategies, including taking girls out of school, child labor, survival sex, and trafficking. All of this part of the loss and damage. Loss and damage due to climate change impacts that cannot be avoided or adapted to. The world needs to fossil fuels and industrial agribusinesses driving the climate crisis. This is for us mitigation. The world also needs to support countries in the global south, like Ethiopia, to adapt to the already inevitable impacts of climate change. This is adaptation for us. But meanwhile, the climate crisis is already here, and it's already causing loss and damage, especially in the global south, especially in the communities that are already marginalized. That is why last year's decision at COP27 to finally establish a loss and damage fund is so crucial. This fund is needed for communities to recover from the impacts of climate change. For example, when drought kills all their livestock, or when flood destroys their homes. This fund provides financial compensation to the people who have contributed least to the climate crisis that are most affected by it. That is why this is crucial for climate justice. There cannot be the climate justice without compensation for loss and damage, without a loss of damage fund that fits to purpose, meaning that serves the needs of most vulnerable communities. Fit for purpose also means inclusive to those communities and to women. While women are at the forefront of any climate-related crisis, they have limited or no access to preparedness and resilience building support, which increases their vulnerability. Because women are worse affected by the climate change, it is important that they are included in the decision-making process about the loss and damage fund. Climate finance also needs to be gender responsive and accessible to women-led organizations and local communities. Overall, gender justice, and human rights more generally need to be at the heart of the Loss and Damage Fund. Last year at the COP, the decision was made for Loss and Damage Fund, but it is yet to be established, and it still needs to be filled. We need COP28 to establish Loss and Damage Fund based on the principle of equity and common but differentiated responsibility, because this fund is about justice. Rich countries who have contributed most to the climate crisis, including the Netherlands, are least affected. The African continent has 17% of the world population, but accounts for not even 4% of the world carbon emissions. The smallest share of all world regions. Yet Africa, my continent, is also facing some of the worst impacts of climate change, such as the drought in the Horn of Africa. This is climate injustice. The smallest contributors are paying the highest price. 48 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa, have only contributed 0.6% to the global carbon emissions. This is less than the Netherlands on its own. Countries like the Netherlands, who bear the historical responsibility and have the financial capacity, need to pay up for the loss and damage they help cause. That is why, at COP28, we also need countries to make significant pledges to the fund. It is time to make polluters pay. It is time to fill the fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Berhane.